Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So for those of you that are listening from Houston, we're continuing with Valmiki, not Valmiki Ramayana, but Krishna Dharma's rendering of Valmiki Ramayana together with some other Ramayanas. I wanted to speak a little bit about this because I kind of, to make a balanced comment on Valmiki Ramayana, something that a person like me that doesn't know much about Ramayana came to learn. There are multiple versions of Ramayana that very strict following Vaishnavas accept. I have come to understand from Prabhupada, Valmiki Ramayana is our gold standard. However, sprinkled in here are some other exchanges, words, even details of things that are not in Valmiki Ramayana, and I kind of bristle is expressed some discomfort a little bit, but it's actually that's my liking, and I shouldn't be disrespectful to other versions, although I like Valmiki Ramayana. And Krishna Dharma, for whatever his purposes, chose to, in certain cases, embellish or modify Valmiki Ramayana, and so it's quite okay. And I think if I do this again, I'm going to read something that's strictly following Valmiki Ramayana, so I don't have to feel uncomfortable. But it's what he has presented here are from valid Ramayana sources. Just like those of you, some of you, maybe a little bit familiar with Brihat Bhagavatamrita. And according to the beginning sections of Brihat Bhagavatamrita, it's taking place after a Mahabharata that's not by Vyasadeva, but it's by Jaimini Rishi, who also compiled Mahabharata, was being narrated, Jujjanamejaya, and he went, wow, that was really good. So as there are different Mahabharats, other than Vyasadeva's Mahabharata, so there's other Ramayanas. And I have a liking for Valmiki Ramayana for a variety of reasons. But so that you sprinkled in here, you'll hear some things that are not Valmiki Ramayana, and I'll probably make some comment as we go along. The section where we ended up yesterday evening was Kaikeyi has just been bamboozled by mantra, and an unsuspecting Dasrath enters into the scene, and Kaikeyi extracts from him 3 times in Ram's name, whatever you say, it's yours, and then she comes out with what she wants, and he faints, and he gets angry, and then he pleads, and he's going through different emotional states. And just now, Kaikeyi said, if I don't get what I want, I swear by Bharat that I'll kill myself. And you'll be responsible. Because the way this is being written is, he has conceded that Bharat can become the king, but Ram shouldn't go in exile. And she said, if Ram doesn't go in exile, then I'm going to fast till I die. And you and your whole lineage will be defiled by that, by your breaking your word. The king's body trembled. Consumed by grief, he gazed with unblinking eyes upon the face of his beautiful wife. He was stunned by her words, which struck him with the force of a thunderbolt. He suddenly dropped to the ground like a felled tree, calling out Ram's name. Like one insane, he lost his mental balance and lay motionless on the cold floor for a considerable time. Gradually, gathering his senses about him, the king stood up and spoke in a choked and anguished voice. I cannot believe you are now speaking your own mind. Who has perverted you towards this evil course? As if possessed by some demon, you speak shamelessly that which should never be spoken. What has inspired you? What has inspired in you this great yet groundless fear? Why are you subtly seeing Ram as your enemy, uttering such cruel words? What do you expect to gain by Bharat's becoming my successor instead of Ram? I expect that Bharat, whose virtues compare with those of Ram, would never reside in Ayodhya without Ram, far less accept the throne. The king had so many times seen Bharat serving Ram with love. There was no question that Bharat would accept the kingdom, leaving Ram aside. What had made Kaikeyi imagine this to be possible? Could it be the hand of the gods? But what purpose of theirs would be achieved by denying Ram the rulership of the world? And even if Bharat should be king, why should Ram be exiled for 14 years? It was unthinkable. Dasarath spoke aloud his thoughts. Having said to Ram, go to the forest, how shall I look upon his crestfallen face, which will exactly resemble the eclipsed moon? Surely the kings assembled from every quarter will say, how has this foolish man ruled the world all this while? When asked by wise and learned men about Ram, how shall I say that I sent him away to the forest, being pressed by Kaikeyi? If I say I was supporting the cause of truth, then what about my declaration that Ram would be installed as my successor? Conflict. I mean, one of the conflicts, it wasn't highlighted, but it was indicated by Kaikeyi, by Mantra. When Kaikeyi, the hand of Kaikeyi was given in marriage to Dasarath by her father, Kushadwaj, there was a promise made by Dasarath, your daughter's son will become king. Now he's made the declaration, Ram will become king. And he's made a declaration saying, whatever you want, I'll do. So it's kind of like all these multiple, how do I uphold the truth when there's conflicting truths? Dasarath fell back onto a couch. His arms were outstretched towards Kaikeyi, who had again fallen on the floor on hearing her husband's arguments. The king wailed in agony. What reply can I make to Kausalya when she asks me why I rendered her such an unkind act? I have always neglected that godly lady in favor of you. Remembering my acts now gives me great pain. Dasarath's mention of Kausalya only made Kaikeyi more furious. What a blatant untruth. How did he expect her to believe that she was more favored than Kausalya? In his desperation, the king was ready to say anything. Kaikeyi stared at her husband, her eyes red with anger. The king continued to speak his passionate words, lost on his implacable queen. Seeing Ram departed for the forest and Sita weeping, I shall soon lose my life. You may then carry out all the affairs of state along with your son as the undisputed ruler. I have always seen you as my devoted and chaste wife. That was my mistake. Unveiled by your empty inducements, I have long held you close. Now you have finally killed me. Even a hunter kills a deer after enticing it with melodious music. Dasra saw that Kaikeyi was not to be swayed from her purpose. His anxiety intensified. In his anger and confusion, he began to blame himself. Surely the whole world would condemn him for sacrificing his sinless son for the sake of a sinful woman. This terrible turn of events could only be the result of his own wicked acts in some previous life. He sat with his head in his hands, crying softly as he spoke. I lament only for the sake of those who will suffer for my sake when I perform the evil act of exiling Ram. For having deprived a son like Ram of fatherly affection, all honest men will rightly revile me in the following words: Alas, this old foolish king, being bound by lust for his favorite queen, could even reject his dearest son. Unable to contain his grief, Dasarath lamented loudly for a long time. Censuring Kaikeyi and calling upon her to have compassion on her fellow queens, on Sita and the citizens of Ayodhya, he tried in many ways to change her mind. Kaikeyi remained adamant. The king then began to realize the inevitability of Ram's departure. He spoke to his queen in complete dismay. The very moment I ask Ram to depart, he will leave, being fully obedient to my order. I shall then be left, cast in the deepest despair with my life's breath quickly expiring. Upon reaching heaven, I shall be censured even by the gods for my vicious behavior. You too will earn unending infamy, O lady of wicked resolve. None shall praise you for causing the virtuous and highly popular Ram to be sent into the wilderness. Dasrath practically writhed in pain as he thought of Ram leaving for the forest. That gentle prince was accustomed to ride upon the finest chariots and elephants. How would he roam the forest on foot? Every day Ram was served by numerous royal cooks, competing to offer him every fine dish. How could he subsist on wild fruits and roots? How could his son put on the coarse garments of the forest dwellers, having always been clad in the costliest of robes? The emperor, devastated, shook with grief. He felt his life slipping away. Gazing at Kaikeyi, who he now saw as his mortal enemy, Dasrath said, "O wicked woman, it is a wonder that on speaking such cruel and vicious words, your teeth do not shatter into 1,000 pieces and fall from your mouth. When Ram goes to the forest, death will surely take me. I will be condemned by all men. Kausalya and Sumantra will then be cast to an abject sorrow and will likely follow me to death's abode. Having inflicted such miseries upon us and being left alone with your son to rule over the world, what other indescribable pains will you give to the remaining people who are also loved by me?" Dasrath had no intentions of asking Ram to leave. He knew his devoted son would depart immediately upon realizing his father's predicament. The king tried one last desperate plea to Kaikeyi. Even if upon my failing to exile my son, you are ready to swallow poison, throw yourself into fire, or hang yourself, I shall by no means banish Ram. You have disgraced your family and are intent upon destroying mine. I shall never accede to your ruthless request. O malicious queen, Abandon now your evil desire. I fall helpless at your feet. Come to your senses and be gracious to me, who has always been your well-wishing protector. Exhausted by grief, Dasra sank to the floor like a man gripped by an illness, his hands stretched out to the feet of his queen. The unflinching Kaikeyi, who had given up all affection for her husband, saw that her ends were still not achieved. Convinced by Mantra of the king's ill intentions towards her, with her intelligence further confused by the gods, Kaikeyi could not accept Dasarath's entreaties. In a disdainful and harsh voice, she addressed the fallen monarch. Where now is your honor, O king? You claim that you adhere to truth is simply an empty boast. Are you to withdraw the boons previously promised to me and further sworn on this very spot? Fulfill my boons as you vowed and protect your far-reaching fame. Dasarath, unconscious, could not reply. After some time, he revived and looked upon his queen's face. From her cold expression, it was obvious that she was not in the least assuaged. Is that the right pronunciation? Assuaged? Don't know. Pacified. The grief-stricken monarch gazed up at the clear night sky. He prayed to Nidra, the night goddess, to stay forever. How could he face the dawn, bringing, as it would, Ram's departure? Dasarath sat, weeping, continuously repeating Ram's name. Kaikeyi spoke impassively. I have only asked you to fulfill your promise to me, O king. Why then do you now lie down dejected? The path of morality has been clearly shown by your ancestors. Proceed upon that path now, O truthful one, and send Ram away. The educated Kaikeyi, knowing her husband to be devoted to religion and piety, invoked the codes of morality. Those men who understand right from wrong declare truthfulness as the highest virtue. I simply urge you to act upon truthfulness alone, O king, and do your duty. Truth is the support of all the worlds. The eternal Vedas represent truth. Virtue itself is rooted in truth, and truth sustains all beings. By following truth, one attains the supreme. Therefore, set your mind on truth, O king, and grant my prayer, banish Ram to the forest. Kaikeyi stood up amid her strewn ornaments. Her eyes flashed as she made her final demand to the king. 3 times you promised, and therefore 3 times I ask you, fulfill my wish to see my son installed on the throne and Ram sent away to the woods. This alone will satisfy me and save me from giving up my life after seeing you abandon your honor. As the unscrupulous Kaikeyi maintained her pressure on him, Dasarath could see no means to escape from his vowed word. With great difficulty, he controlled himself. Drawing upon his reserves of fortitude, his heart burned with unbearable anguish as he looked through tear-dimmed eyes at Kaikeyi. How could he any longer consider her his wife? She was fit to be rejected. Her name should never again be associated with his. No one should call her the queen of Dasarath. The king spoke fiercely. O perverted woman, here and now I disown your hand, which I formally clasp in the presence of the sacred fire and with the utterances of holy mantras. Now The night has passed, and soon the people will joyfully urge me to install Ram. However, as at your insistence, I shall this day surely breathe my last. Ram should be made to offer the last rites to my departed soul. O woman of evil conduct, you should make no offerings to me, for I fully reject you today. Kaikeyi fumed. What use were these empty words? Her husband had already rejected her when he favored Kausalya. She addressed the king in piercing words. Why do you say such scathing and hurtful things, O monarch? I merely ask that you give me what you have already promised. Summon now your son Ram and give up this needless agonizing. Do your duty and stand fast to virtue. Like a first-class horse lashed with whip, Dasrath controlled his mind and righteously responded to Kaikeyi's words. Bound with the strong cords of morality, I'm helpless. My judgment fails me, and in this evil hour, I seek refuge of Ram. Bring my gentle son before me. The king fainted away, exhausted with grief, and his futile efforts to change his wife's mind. Pretty sad, huh? Pretty sad. So we're scheduled to read the next chapter, which is titled Ram Agrees to Depart. In Krishna Dharma's book, it's chapter 7. Towards the end of night, Vashishta, accompanied by numerous disciples, hastily entered Ayodhya from his hermitage outside the city. He went along the well-swept and watered streets, all thronging with citizens eagerly awaiting Ram's installation. Crossing the outer courtyard of the king's palace, which was decorated all over with rows of flags, he approached Dasrath's inner chambers. The rishi saw the courtyard crowded with large numbers of Brahmins reciting sacred mantras from the Vedas. Upon reaching the palace gate, he was met by Sumantra, who prostrated himself before the sage and then immediately left to inform Dasrath of his arrival. As he passed through the palace and approached the inner chamber, Sumantra was entirely ignorant of his master's present plight. He composed his mind, pleasing prayers with which to greet the king, who was dearer to him than his own father. The guards informed Sumantra that the king was in Kaikeyi's chambers, and as he arrived at her door, he began to loudly recite those prayers. Even as the sun which sustains all beings arouses the world, arise now, O emperor, like the sun rising from the eastern hills, as Matali, the minister of Indra, extolled his master, who then rose up and conquered the demons, so do I now extol you to rise up and do your duty, O Lord. All of us await you with joined palms. The glorious sage Vashishta has arrived with other sages and stands ready to perform the installation ceremony of Ram. Order us now to proceed, O mighty monarch. Hearing Sumantra speaking at the door, Dasrath became overwhelmed with sorrow once more. He went to his charioteer and embraced him. The king looked at Sumantra with eyes reddened with grief. Today, O Sumantra, your well-chosen words only pierce my heart with pain. Dasrath's happiness had ended. He could not say anything more and simply stood with tears flowing down his face. Sumantra was unable to fathom the cause of the king's sadness. He stepped back with tightly joined palms. This was strange. Surely, this was the happiest day of Dasrath's life. For so long he had desired a successor. At last his desire was about to be fulfilled. Seeing the mystified Sumantra, Kaikeyi said, The king has remained awake the entire night considering Ram's installation. Sleeplessness has made him unwell. He wishes now to see his son, therefore, bring Ram here. The intelligent minister looked at Dasarath. Something was surely wrong. On such a momentous occasion, why was the king not himself going to fetch Ram? Dasarath saw his minister's confusion. Reassuring him, the king told him to fetch Ram. Sumantra considered then that his master might just be exhausted from the preparations for the installation, saying, "It shall be done." He bowed low and left for Ram's palace. Meanwhile, the priests were making ready all the items required for the ceremony. Around a beautifully carved and adored wooden seat were arranged many golden pitchers filled with water from the sacred rivers, ready to anoint Ram. Above the seat was a large white umbrella which shone like a full moon on a clear night. Excellent musicians played melodies appropriate to the mood, while Brahmins chanted Vedic texts meant to invoke good fortune. The brilliant sun rose in a clear sky, and everyone eagerly awaited the arrival of the king and his son. Sumantra reached Ram's palace, which was as splendid as Mount Kailash. Secured with oak doors 50 feet tall and embellished with hundreds of balconies, its main facade was adorned with gold images studded with innumerable gems. The outer gateway was constructed of coral, worked with gold and embedded with large precious stones of every description. As Sumantra passed through that gateway, he was greeted by delightful music and the aroma of various incenses. Peacocks and cranes crowded the courtyard, which was graced with blossoming trees and bushes. Sumantra descended from his chariot and entered the palace, which was in no way inferior to the palace of Kuvera, the god of riches. Enlivened by simply seeing the palace, Sumantra passed through 3 entrances, each guarded by powerful young warriors wielding spears and bows. Ram was as dear to him as his own life, and his heart pounded with joy as he approached the inner chambers. The corridors through the palace were cool and delightful, decorated with fine wood carvings and lit by the luster of thousands of celestial gems. Arriving at the gate of Ram's personal quarters, Sumantra asked the doorkeepers there to inform Ram of his arrival. Ram, who was alone with Sita, immediately instructed that Sumantra be shown to his room. Sumantra went before Ram, whom he found seated upon a gold couch, being fanned gently with a whisk by Sita. Richly adorned with costly garments and smeared with crimson sandal paste, Ram seemed to shine like the midday sun. He smiled affectionately at Sumantra, who fell prostrated on the ground offering prayers. Rising up with folded hands, the minister said, "Most blessed is Kausalya for having had you as her son. Your father, along with Queen Kaikeyi, now desires to see you. Be pleased to go there without delay." Ram looked at Sita and said, "Surely my father is speaking with his queen about my installation. I think the blessed Kaikeyi, always favorable to my father, must even now be urging the king to make haste with the ceremony, knowing, as she does, how much the emperor longs for his completion. As he has sent his most trusted messenger to fetch me, the king, along with his most beloved queen, undoubtedly wish to bless me that my installation will proceed without impediment." Ram rose to leave, and the dark-eyed and lovely Sita invoked divine blessings upon him. Following her husband to the gate, she said, "After installing you as Prince Regent, the king should, in course of time, consecrate you as the ruler of the world, even as Brahman installed Indra as the ruler of the gods. I wish to serve you in that state. May the great deities Indra, Yamaraj, Varuna, and Kuvera, the guardians of the 4 quarters, guard you from every side." Along with Sumantra, Ram went out from his palace quarters as a mighty mountain lion might emerge from his cave. Ram saw Lakshman standing at the first gate, bent low with joined palms. At the middle gate, Ram met his friends and relations, and he greeted them all according to their status, offering obeisances or embracing them. Within the courtyard, Ram mounted upon a golden chariot which shone like fire and was covered over with white tiger skins and had thousands of golden bells hanging from its sides. The charioteer spurred on the tall steeds, which were as powerful as young elephants, and the chariot moved swiftly with a deep rumbling. As the outer gates swung open, Ram's chariot came out from the palace like a moon emerging from behind a cloud. Ram went along the main road, preceded by a platoon of mailed warriors wearing swords and carrying bows. The prince sat peacefully while Lakshman fanned him. He smiled at the people who thronged the streets in thousands. His chariot was followed by great elephants, resembling moving mountains. Thousands of horsemen brought up the rear. Poets and singers chanted Ram's praises to the accompaniment of divine music, echoing in the heavens. Mixed with these sounds were the shouts of the warriors, which resembled the roaring of lions. Quite a buildup. On the balconies and at the windows of the mansions lining the roads stood women who showered Ram on all sides with flowers. The ladies also praised Sita, saying, "Surely that godly lady has performed the highest penances to have been blessed with this great hero Ram as her husband." The citizens, seeing Ram pass by, uttered blessings. "May victory attend you," they cried. Others were heard to say, "Here goes Ram, who will today inherit the royal fortune. Fortunate too are we, who will soon be ruled by him." Being extolled everywhere, Ram rode down the highway, which was lined with white houses appearing like clouds, and with shops filled with abundant produce of every variety. The streets were strewn with jewels and with grains of rice and blades of kusha grass. Brahmins made offerings of ghee lamps and incense to Ram as he passed, invoking divine blessings and saying, "We would renounce every worldly happiness simply to see Ram coming out of the palace as Prince Regent today. Indeed, even liberation itself is not so desirable." None could even turn away their eyes or mind from Ram as he went along the road in Ayodhya. Everyone looking upon Ram also felt that he was glancing at them. Gradually, Ram and his entourage arrived at Dasarath's palace. Ram passed through the three outer gates on his chariot and then got down and passed through the last two gates on foot. He politely sent back all those persons who had followed him, even though they found it difficult to part from him. At last, Ram reached the inner chambers alone and approached Kaikeyi's rooms. As he entered the rooms, Ram saw the afflicted king seated with Kaikeyi on a golden couch. He bowed at his father's feet, then laid himself low before Kaikeyi, his mind fully composed. Dasarath appeared dejected and distressed, his face streaked with tears. He sat burning in agony and repeatedly sighing, appearing like an eclipsed sun, or like a holy Brahmin who had told a lie. Seeing his son standing before him with a modest demeanor and folded palms, the monarch said only, "Ram," and could not say another word, being overcome by grief. Ram was seized with apprehension in seeing his father in that unusual state. Like the ocean at the rising of the full moon, Ram became agitated. He was devoted to the king and was saddened to see him so sorrowful. How was it that on such a day his father did not greet him? Even when angry, he would always rise to bless his son. Why was he now remaining seated, looking downwards and weeping silently? Ram went before Kaikeyi, who sat at a distance from the king, and addressed her alone. "O godly lady, pray tell me the reason for my father's distress," Ram asked gently. "Even though always affectionate to me, Why does he not greet me today? Have I unwittingly committed some offense? Is the king angry with me for having failed in some way to respect him? Kaikeyi remained silent, and Ram continued. I hope no suffering caused by illness or mental anguish has afflicted my father. Truly, it is said that everlasting happiness cannot be had in this world. I hope I have not offended anyone dear to the king. If I were unable to please my father, or if I failed to do his bidding and thus angered him, I would not survive even for an hour. What wretched man would not devotedly serve his father? Oh, a veritable God to him on earth, to whom he owes his own birth in this world. Understanding from Kaikeyi's taunt expression that there was tension between her and his father, Ram said, perhaps my father has been hurt by some utterance of yours, O fair-faced queen, made out of vanity or anger. My dear Kaikeyi, please inform me of the cause of this unprecedented disturbance to the emperor, for I am very curious. Upon hearing this question from the high-minded Ram, Kaikeyi, who had become impudent and was thinking only of her own interests, replied boldly, the emperor is neither angry nor anguished, O Ram. However, there is something on his mind which he will not disclose for fear of hurting you, his beloved son. Having made a promise to me, the king now repents and wishes to retract his words, just like any ordinary common man. The ever-truthful monarch wants to build a dam across a stream whose waters have already flowed away. Truth is the root of piety. This is known to the righteous, O Ram. Take care lest the king loses now his piety for your sake, angry as he is with me. Looking into Ram's apprehensive eyes, Kaikeyi said, if you will undertake to do whatever the king may ask, be it good or bad for you, then I shall explain everything. I shall speak out the king's promise only as long as it shall not fail because of you. But the king himself will not in any event tell you. Rama was distressed to hear Kaikeyi speaking in this way. Within the hearing of the emperor, he replied to her, alas, how shameful it is that I should hear words expressing doubt about my devotion to my father. You should never think this, O glorious lady. At my father's command, I would this very moment leap into blazing fire, swallow a deadly poison, or plunge into the depths of the ocean. Therefore, tell me, my dear mother, what is on your mind? By my avowed word, I shall without doubt do whatever is desired by the king. Know that Ram's word is always truth. Seeing the mute king and the guileless Ram prepared to carry out her desire, Kaikeyi felt her purposes all but accomplished. It was in an unkind voice she revealed her wicked intentions to Ram. It is well known how I once saved the king's life and how, as a result, he granted me a couple of boons. Again, those boons I solicited today, a promise from the king to fulfill my desire. I wish for Bharata to be installed in your place and for you to go to the forest, remaining there for 14 years. O descendant of emperors, prove true to your word and to that of your father. Indeed, rescue the king from the ignominy of impiety and leave without delay. Let Bharata be duly consecrated with all the paraphernalia arranged for you. While he remains here to rule this wide and prosperous earth, you shall remain for 14 years in some distant forest, wearing matted locks and the barks of trees. The king cried out in pain as Kausalya spoke. Ram stood by without showing any emotion as the queen continued. Overcome by compassion for you, this monarch cannot even look at your face. O Ram, ornament of your line, make good his promise and deliver him from his difficult and awkward situation. Even though Kaikeyi uttered such cruel words, Ram did not yield to grief. The king, however, felt increased agony as he thought about his impending separation from Ram. He listened in silence as Ram replied to Kaikeyi, "So be it. To honor my father's promise, I shall put on the dress of an ascetic and depart forthwith to the forest. You need entertain no doubt in this regard, O queen. Why, though, does not my father greet me as before? I could never transgress his order, even as the ocean, by the order of the Supreme Lord, can never transgress its shores." Ram looked across at his father, who could not return his glance. The king kept his head down and wept softly. Ram turned back to Kaikeyi. "Ordered only by you, O Kaikeyi, I would joyfully part with, in favor of Bharat, not only the kingdom, but also all my personal property, my wedded wife Sita, and even my own beloved self. How much more gladly would I part with these things when ordered by my father, the emperor himself, in order to please you and honor his pledge. Please reassure my afflicted father, for seeing him sitting there shedding tears pains me greatly. He may feel assured that I shall immediately enact his desire without feeling any sorrow at all. Let swift horses be sent for Bharat. Without questioning my father's command, I shall now quickly proceed to the forest." The ignoble Kaikeyi then rejoiced at heart. Confident that Ram would soon leave, she urged him to hurry. "Let it be so," she exclaimed. "Messengers may leave immediately to fetch Bharat from his uncle's kingdom. You should not wait a moment, O Ram, lest some impediment presents itself. Keen as you are to depart, leave right now. Do not be concerned for the king's silence, for he is too shy to ask you himself. Let this apprehension be banished from your mind and make haste. As long as you have not left, the king will take neither food nor water." Drawing a deep sigh with the words, "Alas, how very painful," the king collapsed unconscious on the couch. Ram gently placed his cool hands on his father's forehead and raised him up. Now, this isn't in Valmiki Ramayana, as far as I know. The prince was again urged on by Kaikeyi. Turning towards her, Ram said, "I have no desire to live in this world as a slave to material gains. Like the rishis, I am devoted only to righteousness. I will always do whatever is agreeable to my adorable father, even at the cost of my life. The greatest piety lies in serving one's father. Indeed, O gentle lady, greater still is service to the mother, according to the sacred text. Surely you do not see any good points in me, O Princess Kaikeyi, as you felt it necessary to ask such a minor thing of my father. Your request alone would have sufficed. I shall go to a lonely forest and live there for 14 years. Please bear with me, only as long as it takes for me to take leave of my other mothers and to gain the agreement of Sita. Try to ensure that Bharat protects the kingdom and serves his aged father, for this is the eternal morality." One page left. Unable to speak due to grief, Dasarath wept aloud. Ram bowed low at the feet of his royal father, and also before the hard-hearted Kaikeyi. He was moved by acute sorrow, but he kept it within himself, showing no external sign. Joining his palms and circumambulating his father and stepmother, Ram departed. He then made his way to Kausalya's rooms. Lakshman, hearing from Ram of the turn of events, followed close behind, his eyes brimming with tears. Reaching the room where the installation was to be performed, Ram respectfully went around the royal seat without casting his eyes upon it. Despite his renouncing the rulership of the world, no change of mood could be perceived in Ram any more than in a perfect yogi who has completely transcended all dualities. Forbidding the use of the royal umbrella, which was offered to him as he left, as well as the pair of beautiful royal whisks, Ram sent away his ministers, his chariot, and the citizens. The news of Ram's impending exile had quickly spread, and the people were shocked and dismayed. By mastery over his mind and senses, Ram controlled his own agony upon seeing the people's sadness. He exhibited his normal peaceful demeanor and approached Kausalya's apartments. He was followed by Lakshmana, who, seeing his brother equipoised, was strenuously controlling his own emotions. Ram smiled softly. He was as dear to his relatives as their own lives, and he did not wish to display any feelings which would cause them pain. As he entered Kausalya's quarters, a loud and pathetic cry came from the ladies. Alas! Here is that Ram who has served all of us exactly as he did his own mother. Today he will leave for the forest. How could the foolish king exile the harmless Ram and thus bring ruin to the world? Hearing from a distance the piteous wail, Dasara shrank with shame and hid his head beneath the silken sheets on his couch. Ram went toward Kausalya's rooms. He carefully maintained his composure, although he felt agonized at seeing the sufferings of his relatives. As he approached the outer entrance of Kausalya's apartments, he saw many doorkeepers seated and standing there. They quickly flocked around Ram, uttering blessings on the young prince. At the middle entrance, Ram was greeted by elderly Brahmins who were constantly reciting Vedic hymns. Bowing low before them, Ram entered and came into the inner door where he was led into Kausalya's chambers by her personal maidservants. He's a good writer. I mean, his use of language is very skillful. So you wanted a subtitle. The subtitle is Grief and Fury. That's next coming up, Grief and Fury. So maybe we should just skip over this and go to the nice parts. I mean, his appearance is coming in just a few days. Going to be a lot of sadness between now and something that I shared yesterday. I think it's worth sharing it again because it's heavy just to read all this. Prabhupada speaks about this, writes about this in Nectar of Devotion. And he doesn't cover it extensively, but the principle that's stated goes something like this. The sadness or sorrow of the residents of Ayodhya looks really bad or unhappy, but it's actually a kind of ecstasy. And so reading that, and particularly when we were in Ayodhya, going over it again and again and again in Ayodhya for the Ayodhya Yatra, it was heavy, and the people were hearing it were like not looking happy because it's sad. So I researched Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, referencing what Prabhupada had written in Nectar Devotion in a simple way. And there's a very long section where the 12 different rasas are identified. And then there's presiding deities of each of the 12 rasas. And at least in the Ramayana that I was reading from, the word that was used so many times was sorrow. And there are different translations for one of the 7 secondary rasas, but the sorrow is a secondary rasa, and Lord Ram is the presiding deity over that secondary rasa, because it's replete in his pastimes. Because when this happens, everyone's feeling afflicted by sorrow. And what secondary rasas do in principle is they seem to temporarily eclipse the primary rasa, or they cover over the primary rasa, and that secondary rasa predominates. But that secondary rasa is simply nourishing the primary rasa in a particular way. Because obviously after some time he returns and it's the opposite, very joyful. But when it happens, it's the secondary rasa is nourishing the primary rasa, according to the relationship of each of the personalities. Because we're just starting to hear, we're going to hear more, tomorrow. What their feelings are, and depending upon their relationship. I mean, Lakshman's got his, and Kausalya has hers, and Sita has hers, and I really like how Lakshman's wife responds to all this. It's really nice. It's really nice. So each person's heart is struck in a particular way, but it's nourishing the primary rasa. It's enhancing the primary rasa. And in and of itself, it's an ecstasy. It's a type of ecstasy. Although for us, it looks horrible. For the ISKCON devotees, a comparable one is Krishna leaving Vrindavan and what all the residents of Vrindavan felt when Krishna left Vrindavan, and how they felt towards Akrura. But it's a heightening of primary rasa, and that's the nature of Krishna's pastimes. In Brihat Bhagavatamrita, when Narada Muni starts relating Krishna's departure from Vrindavan, he prefaces it by saying, one should not speak about these things. Because people who hear these things, they may think, I don't want to get attached to Krishna, because they'll have to go through that kind of ordeal. But then because he starts to think about it, he starts to speak about it, he goes into this whole long thing. It's very elaborate, very elaborate, very, very elaborate, even quite different than what we know from the Bhagavatam. Brihat Bhagavatamrita, Krishna disappearing and going and hanging out with the gopis for a while, and so many things. So many things. But it's rasa. And rasa means it's a mellow, it's an ecstasy. So I guess, so that we can sleep tonight, we can just try to remind ourselves, hey man, it's an ecstasy. Oh, could have fooled me. Now, there's many other things besides rasa that's going on. There's the pastime of his appearance in this world, Pritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskatam, and that's accomplished by going to the forest, because that's where the Rakshasas are, starting with Kara and Dushan and everything. So he went to the forest. So he could go to the forest this way or that way or another way, or giving his association to the rishis who are in the forest. Pritranaya sadhanam. How are they going to get his? They were hankering for his association, so he gave it. And he gave it in a certain way, but he was reciprocating. They're doing their yagyas and doing their meditation and meditating upon the Supreme Lord, so he appeared before them. They were happy. Who can imagine how happy? Who can imagine how happy? Personally came, according to Valmiki Ramayana, for 11 and a half years, 12 and a half years. That's all he did. I mean, the primary thing he did, 12 and a half years. One of the classes that will be continuing 2 weeks from yesterday or something like that. Yeah, is part 2 of Krishna rescues Nanda Maharaj from the abode of Varuna, because it was so robust we didn't get to finish it with the Chinese devotees because it took twice as long because they had to translate. So we'll do a summary, but one of the considerations in that is Kuvera. Sanatan Goswami says or writes that actually it wasn't what Varuna did was not an offense, because he just wanted to see Krishna. And he knew how to see Krishna. He, he didn't say he arranged it, but when his representative servant kidnapped Nanda, Krishna would come rescue Nanda. And when he went to rescue Nanda, then he would see Krishna. His life was perfect. He was a devotee, but he hadn't seen Krishna. Now his life was perfect because he saw Krishna. So these sages in the forest, their lives became perfect by seeing Ram. Perfect. Years and years and years and years of austerities, etc., etc., etc. Performance of yagyas and performance of meditation and everything. And then he comes. So he's fulfilling their desire. So there's multiple purposes going on simultaneously. And one of them is this, horrible thing. And here it says, we just read it, but it was in the earlier part of the chapter, that Kaikeyi was, the intelligence of Kaikeyi was moved by the gods, but is actually moved by Ram himself, according to the commentators of Valmiki Ramayana. Within her heart, because he had a pastime to perform, she was inspired to do what she did. And so she did it. I don't want that kind of service that Kaikeyi had, though. That's like really tough. But it served a purpose. The Lord's purpose. So let's see if there's some discussion. How are we planning to do this? What I'm used to doing, if there's any points from the room, we do that first. It gives people online a chance to send something in. And then we go online and we go back and forth a bit. So is there anything from someone in the room who would like to discuss something? Okay, can we give you the microphone for the online people? Do we have a microphone for the, we don't have? Do we have a second microphone? We can pass this one.
Oh, okay. Can you? So, Maharaj, some people may use this in a tricky way, that if Kaikeyi was inspired by Ram,
There's a little echo. Let's get this thing back in.
So if Kaikeyi was inspired by Ram to act uh, in a whatever way she acted, some people can use that whenever they are acting bad. So how do we explain that?
That's called cheating. That was special sound effects because such an important question. When the Supreme Lord inspires, I mean, it's not just Kaikeyi, it's Ram got bewildered, and there's so many situations like that. Someone acts on behalf of Uddhava, says, I'm overly attached to a family life. Please help me become free from that attachment. Others say, so is the purpose of the Lord being served? And, for us, Guru Sadhu Shastra that's the check and balance. And if there's Guru Sadhu Shastra that confirms, then we can accept. And if not, we don't accept. Now, how do we know that? We know from our acharyas. They say Ram inspired. So a worldly person, a deceptive person saying such things doesn't hold the same weight. No Guru Sadhu Shastra verification. Okay. Anything else in the room or anything else online? Do we have something in the room? Gosh. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Two questions. First, you talked about the secondary rasa eclipsing the primary rasa. So the question is, we see this mode of separation, even Srimad Bhagavatam, Queen Kinti, departure of Lord from Hastinapur, the local residents feeling, then he enters Dwaraka. So there is a underlying thread of this mode of separation. So
It's not go ahead.
yeah, so now you shared so well in Lord Ramayana in his in his the same secondary rasa. So my question is, even realized soul, when they miss their spiritual master, and it's like they're in sorrow because the spiritual masters left this world, so they have the secondary rasa again influencing, echoing, eclipsing the primary rasa, where they have full connection. And when they pray that I miss my spiritual master, this I'm talking of very advanced souls. They're in sorrow.
You just said three things, not one thing. There's separation, and that's not the same as a secondary rasa. Separation is separation, some meeting and separation. And there's primary and secondary rasas, they're not interchangeable terminologies. So then you spoke about Krishna's departing Hastinapur and what they were feeling. Now, I wasn't sure what the connection was between what we just read and the example of Krishna's leaving Hastinapur, and exalted devotees are feeling separation from their spiritual master. It's not a rasa, it's separation. Does that address your question?
There's some sorrow, element of sorrow.
Well, the element of sorrow is what it is. It's not specifically separation. It's a rasa. And Rasa applies to Krishna. Now, there can be sorrow in relation to one spiritual master departing, but it's, rasa-wise, it's in relation to Krishna, not just feeling separation from someone. Okay? Now, there's a second question, or that's it? Yes. One more.
Thank you, Maharaj. So, yes. So we see, I think there was a question earlier in this series that Dashrath is attached to Ram, and it's a spiritual attachment. It's his spiritual. So now we see attachment, knowledge and attachment brings detachment. That's the learning we got. So here we consider this as Leela and not Dashrath is weak. And the way he's following and trembling, he can say, go away to Kaikeyi, but it is just that it's a Leela which is manifesting. That's all. Thank you.
His attachment is not material, it's spiritual. He's detached from material. He has knowledge of detachment from the material. He has spiritual attachment, like anything, and they're different. Okay, how are we doing? Online, some questions? You want the microphone?
First question is from Archana Vaidya. She asks, how do we explain the secondary rasa to new people?
I don't think you tried.
Next question is from Snehavali Devidasi. She asks,
I'll take another shot at it. I would venture that you just keep it really simple. You don't have to say primary, secondary. You don't have to say primary, secondary. You just say there's material emotion and there's spiritual emotion. And the spiritual emotion is a type of ecstasy. And so let us not mistake and confuse the two. Just like there's transcendental love and there's mundane, self-aggrandizement kind of thing that goes under the name of love. But transcendental love is another plane, and transcendental sadness, due to spiritual affinity, is another plane. So I think you can keep it like that. Now, are they going to understand that? Probably not. But it's another kind of transcendental emotions are transcendental.
Next question from Snehavali Devidasi. She asks, we have heard before that Lord Ram always said that he wanted to uphold the words of Dasharatha, even when Vashishta insisted him to come back and rule the kingdom. I am curious to know why Lord Rama didn't uphold Dasharatha's promise, which he gave to Kushadwaja, that Bharata will be the king of Ayodhya. Could you please comment?
You ask fantastic questions. That's my comment. And it doesn't play a prominent role. The Kushadwaj promise does not play a prominent role. The prominent role is the promise that was made to Kaikeyi. The other one doesn't play a prominent role. Why it does not play a prominent role? It probably has something to do with the Lord's potencies and his leelas, etc. Now, I know some devotees that are very studied or deeply absorbed in Ramayana, and I'll see if they have an answer to your question. And if there is an answer, I'll get back.
Next question is from Ram Kishore Das. He asks, what is the most important thing to learn or meditate on from Lord Ram as we lead up to his appearance day? As we lead up to his appearance day.
The answer to that question, I think a lot depends upon one's bhakti. Because there's his whole life. And some virtues that Ram exhibited are particularly meaningful to some devotees, and something else to another devotee, and so forth. So Ramayana is vast, and the question is, what's the most important? And my answer is that which strikes your heart most and inspires you the most in devotion. That's what's most important to focus on.
Question from Uttama Bhaktaprabhu. He asks, regarding bhakti, has Lord Ram said anything that one who takes shelter of me once, I protect him?
You want to know, did Ram say that? Yeah, he said it to me. This was discussed when speaking to the Chinese devotees, and it's going to be that this is the topic that the Sunday after, the Sunday after Ram's appearance for the Central New Jersey ISKCON Sunday program. I'll be covering that same topic, and you'll find it if you tune in. We'll be discussing it then. But the circumstance was when Vibhishan came to surrender, Ram asked his ministers and generals, should he be accepted? And they had their whole different opinions. Hanuman expressed his opinion, and then Ram expressed what he was going to do. He said, I've already accepted him. In fact, Hanuman said, I know my Lord, he's already accepted him. So that's when that statement was made. One who says even once, from this, I surrender unto you from this day forward. I will protect such person and free them from fear.
Hare Krishna Maharaji. First of all, I really thank you from my core of my heart coming to our place. Thank you very much. It's been a while actually. So we are very grateful that you came to our place. So Maharaji, this question has come to my mind many times, but so I think you are the right person to ask that question. So Prabhupada ji has written really wonderful books, and he has written enough books so that we can advance in Krishna consciousness. And also whenever we are in doubt, we can always go back to the books or hear his lectures or hear Prabhupada disciples lecture to clarify things. As you know that a lot of like we can say that like I can tell let me tell my thing is that me and my wife, we both work and we have kids. So what happened is that we have time to chant and do our services, but then it comes to reading books. There are also other books which are always coming up. Every year, 2 or 3 books are launched in ISKCON. So what I'm trying to say that, do we need more books? Because we already have enough books written by Prabhupada ji. Like why we are adding things because nobody can match Prabhupada. When we read the literature, when we take our book, read their literature, to be honest, it's so much different than
Your question is, why do people write books when there's already sufficient books?
Like we don't have time. Like I will say that.
That's two different questions.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Time is one thing, and people writing is another thing.
I think
Which is it?
my question is that do we need more books to
We
read?
do need more books, or does the world need more books? Which is it?
No, my question is that we already have Prabhupada books. Why do we need more books?
Okay. We don't need more than you do. There's many layers of responding, but keeping it really simple. It's for the purification of the person who is expressing. Maybe recently I heard Giriraj Maharaj giving passages from the book that he recently wrote. And he went back to when Prabhupada first told him to write. And he didn't because he did some management, but it was an instruction that he was. So why write books when there's already Prabhupada's? Why would Prabhupada ask him to write books? Because he's good at writing, and it's purification for him. And it's another picture and another picture. So why write? Because it's something that he instructed, not just Giriraj Maharaj, but he instructed his followers. He wanted his followers to write articles for Back to Godhead magazine. When his books were abundant, we couldn't keep up with his books, with the book publishing and editing and this thing and that thing, and he wanted us to write. So fill the world with, for our purification and the world's purification, fill the world with more literature. Now, another question is, what about you with an occupation, 2 children, and your sadhana? And you hardly have time to read much of anything. So should you spend time with Prabhupada's books, or should you put Prabhupada's books off to the side and read these new books as they come out? I think you know the answer to that question. Something that I'm inspired by is, because I'm hearing Prabhupada's recorded lectures, and it's part of the duty of a teacher or an acharya to write and to give. So I'm speaking rather than writing, and I'm thinking maybe I should stop speaking and do more writing or something. But then I hear you saying, why more books? It's a duty. It's a service to Krishna, and whoever benefits, benefits. Now, for the persons who have more discretionary time than you and your wife, should they be reading these other books? Well, first and foremost, become very proficient, very learned in Prabhupada's books. And here we are. We're reading Ramayana. This isn't Prabhupada's book. So why are we doing it? You could ask me that question. Why are we reading Ramayana? Why do we read Prabhupada's books? So in the morning, we're going to read Prabhupada's books. But it's Ram Navami, so Prabhupada didn't translate Ramayana and make commentaries. We're reading this. And once you read something, sometimes something inspires. And I know devotees, as I mentioned, I know devotees that they really love Ramayana. They really love Lord Ram, and they really love Ramayana. And it picks them up. So keep doing it. They don't neglect Prabhupada's books, but they love Ramayana. So it's, etc.
I just want to clarify one more thing. Clarify, Maharaj, that my question was not to criticize anyone, it was just a question. Yeah, I just want to clarify.
I didn't take it as criticism.
Sorry, Krishna Maharaj. It's more of a observation. I think you answered the part about King Dashratha's attachment being spiritual.
But when listening to the dialogue between him and Queen Kaikeyi, I was thinking that, of course, Dashratha, I mean, he's an exalted person. He's the ruler of Ayodhya. Ram appeared as his son, so he's not ordinary in any sense. And in that dialogue, Queen Kaikeyi is the one who is quoting morality and upholding the truth, where he knows all of that. He sent Ram to Vashishta's ashram for Gurukul. He sent him with Vishwamitra Muni. He knows he can take care of himself. So, but it was just interesting to see that all his arguments were just attachment. I cannot let him go. How can he live in the forest? And Queen Kaikeyi was the one saying, no, you're a ruler, uphold the truth. It was just interesting to see that dynamic.
I was thinking something quite similar, meaning there's the transcendental emotion and there's the appeal for morality. And morality isn't an appeal for transcendental emotion. But because Dasarath is Dasarath, along with his emotion, transcendental attachment to Ram, he was bound by morality. She knew her man, and she got him. And it's not only morality; it's another part of virtue that in modern times doesn't really. It's not something that weighs on people's decision making, but upholding the family line, the name of the line in which one has come. And Krishna speaks like that to Arjuna. This will be infamy for your dynasty, and that's a big deal for people who are noble. And people who aren't, it's not a big deal. There's nothing to uphold. But so that's another, you say a lesser than truth and righteousness, but it's another force that's operating in the life of a noble person. Anything else in the room? Otherwise, we're done. You got something online? Okay.
Question from Swetdi Prabhu. Are there similar leelas where devotees experience separation from Lord Ram? That is, Ravana kidnapping Sita in Ayodhya in spiritual world.
My understanding of how obstacles work in Ayodhya in the spiritual world or Krishna Loka in the spiritual world is that there's two opinions. That there's bhavas of these things, but there's no manifestation of these things, of some obstacle. And when the bhava arises, then it's as if there's actually an obstacle, or there's actually, what's the word in literature? An antagonist, protagonist, antagonist. There's no antagonists. Everything is harmonious, but there's some feeling. It's something like in Vaikuntha, there's a chief general, right? Vishvaksena. Well, why need a chief general in Vaikuntha? Because there's no opposition. Or what we find in Brahma Samhita, there's guardians in the different directions to keep unqualified people from entering Krishna Loka, but there's no unqualified people that can enter Krishna Loka. You can't even get there. But it's so there's some kind of sense that serves the same purpose. The bhava of some obstacle or some antagonist or some difficulty, but there is none. Now that there is a different view, and it's diversity of view is allowed in the spiritual world, and in Krishna Sangiti, I think is the title of Shiva Ramaraj's book. There's a little section. Who asked this? Shweta asked this question. I can send it to him. Where it says, he writes, there are demons in Krishna Loka. And he gives his logic and his reasons and the scriptural references. And there's another view that says there's no demons. It's a bhava that there's demons. And so it's different ways of reading or different realizations about the same subject. So I don't know if that's what he's asking, but I can send him that little section. My personal understanding and view is because there's no demons. Prabhupada's indication, there's no demons. But there is a sense, because it strengthens or it nourishes the primary rasa. Okay, now we're done? One more.
This one's from Jagadish Prabhu. He asks, what is the significance of the 14 years of exile?
All I understand about the 14 years is that after some time, because it would take a while, everyone has had affection for Ram. I mean, it could be 16 years instead of 14 years. Why 14 instead of 16? If that's the question, I don't know. But some extended period of time, because after some extended time, Bharata would have established her reasoning and Mantra's reasoning. Bharata would have established his little infrastructure and people loyal to him. And so if Ram came, the loyalty to Ram would now already be replaced by loyalty to Bharat. But if Ram stayed around without being exiled for a long period of time, then it would be difficult for Bharata to rule, because people have all their affection and loyalty to Ram. So he had to be gone for a long time. Now, it could be, he has to be gone for the rest of his life. Why not that instead of 14 years or 16 years or 20 years? It's gone for the rest of his life. If someone could reason that kind of a question, it wouldn't have fit in with the Leela. It's got to come back, become the king. And Bharata had taken a vow that he would, at the end of 14 years, if Ram hadn't come back, he would give up his life. So it's just part of the Leela. But the purpose was an extended period of time. He would be away.